So almost immediately after the Weird Sisters give this prophecy, Macbeth begins to have kind of a crisis of character. So I want to look at these few lines to underscore some of the stuff that he's struggling with here. So he begins here by talking about this supernatural soliciting, which is synonymous with the prophecy, and it's just a fancy way of saying this. And he's struggling with whether it's good or bad. And here we get some paradoxical language. He says it can't be bad, but it can't be good as well, which is impossible for these two things to happen at once. He says if it's bad, then why is it true, right? He says, I am Thane of Cawdor. If a prophecy is bad, then it doesn't come to fruition. And yet this prophecy has come to fruition. So it can't be bad because it's true. And yet, almost in the same breath, he says, well, if it's good, why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? A little bit later, my thought whose murder yet is but fantastical shakes so my single state of man that function is smothered in surmise. Nothing is but what is not. He says, if this is good, then why is almost the first thing I'm thinking about murder? Why is this horrible image coming to my mind? And he's already thinking about murdering the king. The conclusion here suggests that Macbeth is even more steeped in paradox than he realizes. Nothing is, but what is not is maybe the most paradoxical statement that we've gotten in the play so far. All right, so Macbeth himself now is in this moment of paradox, in this moment of unsurety, ambiguity. The paradoxical nature of the Weird Sisters has passed its way into him, and so in the next scene, Macbeth is standing here now with the king, and the king is about to name his successor. And Macbeth, given the fact that he's just gotten all these prophecies, is led to believe that he will be the successor to the king. And yet that's not the case. And so now Macbeth becomes even more, in some ways, assured that the only way that he's going to be able to fulfill this prophecy is through some dark and dastardly deed. And so he appeals to the stars to hide themselves so that they don't see him. And then he appeals to himself that his eye would close itself to his hand, so that in some ways he would close himself off from the deed that he needs to do. In that sense, it's almost as though he himself is becoming a literal paradox, that he would be unaware of himself, that he would be what he is not, both things happening at the same time here. The end of the scene, the end of the act, after Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have hatched their more explicit plot, Macbeth concludes and says that false face must hide what the false heart doth know. We'll spend a little more time talking about that a little bit later on. But in this, we see again a genuine sense of paradox, that he knows that his face has to lie to hide the falseness of his heart. And he himself is becoming a lie. He is closing himself off to the dark deed that he knows he must do.